further ado, I'll hand it over to Stacy.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this presentation on nutrition and hydration for long rides. As David said, I am the owner of the Cycle Sanctuary. We opened about a year ago in Ballard. We focus on power, performance, and results using the indoor training forum to improve performance out on the road. So I've been working with cyclists and athletes for about 20 years, working on goals from improving health, wellness, fitness to race-specific goals like STP. And what I realized pretty early on is that no matter how hard you train on the bike, if you don't have your lifestyle habits, healthy lifestyle habits dialed in, you will have a very hard time realizing your full potential. So that led me to turn to sports nutrition to figure out how I can support athletes, cyclists on the journey, not just in their training on the bike, but also with the healthy habits like nutrition, hydration, sleep, exercise, and self-care. So I will be addressing those tonight as kind of the foundation, in addition to speaking specifically about nutrition, what to eat before, during, and after a ride, and hydration before, during, and after a ride. We're also going to talk about glycogen stores, what they are, where you find them, how you fill them, what depletion looks like, feels like, and then how to prevent that. And then I'll finish up with a little bit more on electrolytes and preventing cramping, which may be an issue that you've experienced, very preventable. I will stop every couple of slides to take any questions along the way, but I have a ton of info ready to share with you. So let's get started. Okay, so looking at, come on. All right, so starting with healthy lifestyle habits. Nutrition. So do you eat balanced meals and snacks throughout the day, every 3 to 4 hours, with high quality foods to make sure that your blood sugar stays even, to make sure that your energy level is even throughout the day? Or are you starting your day with coffee and then not eating until late afternoon because you're busy, and then craving all kinds of carbs in the evening and eating a huge meal and maybe not feeling your best? So we're going to talk a lot about balanced meals, what that looks like in life, and then what that looks like leading up to a long ride. Calorie intake, also really important to make sure that you're getting enough, not too much, not too little, to support your active lifestyle. And then the macronutrient balance. So talking about how much protein do you need, how much healthy fat, how many carbohydrates in terms of percentages. So we'll talk specifically about those. Hydration, that's something that is happening all day, every day. So for an example, water requirements, if you are 200 pounds, you should be drinking about half your body weight in ounces. That would be 100 ounces of water a day. Okay, I see somebody drinking water as we speak. So making sure that you are starting your day off with water and drinking systematically throughout the day to make sure that you are meeting the requirements for your water intake. So when you add any kind of sweaty workouts, heated temperatures outside, adding electrolytes and sodium to help support the loss that would come through sweat. We'll talk very specifically about electrolytes as well as sodium needs. Exercise. So a balanced routine would include cardiovascular exercise, which I know you're all doing because we're here talking about long rides. But are you also strength training? So building muscle mass, increasing bone density. Are you adding flexibility and mobility training into your routine to prevent injury and to keep your body flexible and mobile? Sleep. This is a huge piece. This is where recovery happens. So are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sound sleep, high quality sleep a night. And that would include that you're in about 50% of the time, you are in REM and deep sleep combined. That is where your body recovers, and that is going to help to increase your athletic performance. We're going to talk specifically about supplements, about things that you can do that will help support sound sleep. And then self-care, a really big piece. So life is stressful. That has a physiological impact on your body and your athletic performance. So if you can actively lower your stress levels, you will lower your resting heart rate, you will increase your heart rate variability, and you will increase your recovery. So these are all really important foundational pieces in creating or improving athletic performance. So just as a quick example, we're going to get a little deeper into each one of these, but all 5 have to be in place. If one is missing, it can throw everything out of whack. So just a quick example. Let's say your nutrition is super dialed in. You're eating 3 meals a day, 2 balanced snacks. You're drinking 100 ounces of water a day. You're in a really balanced exercise program that includes cardio, strength training, and flexibility mobility training. You generally try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but you're under a lot of stress and you have a huge project at work happening and you're up really late. You end up getting 4 hours of sleep. The next day, you're probably going to feel less productive. You might say no to your workout, or at least the intensity level is probably going to go down. You might find that you're craving carbohydrates because your body's looking for quick energy to get on board so that it can just get you through the day. So all the things that you have in place might end up kind of going by the wayside because you're lacking that one piece, which was the sound sleep. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each one of these, and I'm going to give you specific recommendations about what you're going to want to have in place to support each one. So as we look at nutrition, so ideally you're choosing foods that are going to support your health and wellness, your athletic performance, your energy, your focus, your productivity. Those are going to be single ingredient, high quality foods. So things like chicken, broccoli, sweet potato, single ingredient. When we look at packaged processed foods, there are typically a long list of ingredients, many that we can't even pronounce. Those are the kinds of things that are going to weigh you down, that might cause inflammation, that might cause kind of brain fog and weight gain potentially. So in thinking about fueling like an athlete, everything that you put in your mouth, is that supporting your athletic performance, supporting your energy level, or are you turning to things that may be causing inflammation, that may be feeding disease, things like processed packaged foods, any kind of added sugar, fast food, fried foods. Alcohol, unfortunately, is a big inflammation causer. When we drink alcohol, the liver drops everything, sends food to fat stores because it needs to process and deal with the toxin. So also when you're drinking alcohol the next day for a long ride, not ideal, probably not feeling your best. So keeping that in moderation. Gluten and dairy can tend to cause inflammation. It's something to just be aware of. Gluten is something that if you feel tightness in your joints, swelling, pain, could be related to that. Dairy, I always tell people, if you find that you are like, your nose is dripping and you're blowing your nose throughout a long ride, try cutting the dairy out for a little bit and see if you notice a change. That can cause a lot of kind of postnasal drip, can be really annoying on a bike ride. So something to play with. Fueling like an athlete, always keep that in mind. Eating 3 balanced meals per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, about every 3 to 4 hours, you're going to want to fuel with a balanced meal that would include protein, healthy fat, carbohydrate, and lots of vegetables. And then 1 to 2 balanced snacks as needed. Balanced snacks are going to include at least 2 macronutrients, so protein plus a carb, or healthy fat plus a carb, or fat plus protein. The reason I say that is when you eat a carbohydrate by itself, it will increase glucose in your bloodstream. Your body then has to send out insulin to grab that and get it out of the bloodstream and to level things out. When you add protein or fat or high fiber vegetables to a carbohydrate, it slows the way that the body absorbs the carbohydrate and the way that the blood goes, or the sugar goes into the bloodstream. So just as a general practice, that's where balance comes into play: protein, healthy fat, and carbohydrates. If you're plan to eat, and I say plan because it does take thought and planning to make sure that you have meals ready to go. So prepping meals in advance, or having a plan of how you're going to make sure that you eat systematically throughout the day, never letting yourself get to that starving point where your blood sugar drops. That's going to drop your energy level as well. So making sure you're planned and prepped and you have meals to eat systematically throughout the day. Balanced meals should include a serving of high quality protein, healthy fat, complex carbohydrates, plus about half of your plate filled with vegetables. I do have percentages there. We're going to talk more specifically about this in a little bit, but generally 20 to 30% of your calories will come from protein. 20 to 30% of your calories will come from fat, and then about 40 to 60% of the calories should come from complex carbohydrates. I give the range because in general, just healthy living, balance is key. So we're looking at more of a 30-30-40, but fueling for a long ride and filling the glycogen stores, you're going to have to push the carbohydrates up to 50 to 60%. So that's where that range comes into play. And I'll address that a little bit more specifically in a bit. Any quick questions on this before I move on to hydration?
No, no questions in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So proper hydration. So in general, being hydrated, you're looking at about half of your body weight in ounces of water. So whatever you weigh, take half of that, and that's your goal for water consumption during the day. Again, if you are 200 pounds, then you're going to want to try for about 100 ounces of water. That's challenging unless you really plan for that. There are water reminder apps that will ping you every 30 minutes or so that you can drink a glass of water to try to get it all done throughout the day. Waiting to the end of the day is disastrous. You'll end up waking up 12 times to go to the bathroom, and that's not very fun. So if you can get the water in earlier and then throughout the day, that is the ideal. As I said, you're going to increase that on any kind of sweaty workout days, long rides. That's where you're also going to need to replenish electrolytes and salt. So I will talk more about this specifically when we get into hydration for a long ride. But just to keep in mind, when you sweat, do you notice any white crystals on your clothes, on your skin, anywhere on your body? That would mean that you're probably sweating out a lot of salt and you would need to replenish. So what I typically recommend is a pinch of sea salt into your water. You don't even taste it, but it just helps to support any kind of salt loss. I'll talk specifically about electrolytes and the types that I recommend when we get to hydration for the long ride. Keep in mind, coffee and tea, caffeine specifically, and alcohol all act as a diuretic. So you need to increase your water to compensate when necessary. Okay, so diuretic meaning that you're going to end up losing more water than holding on to it. So increasing the water to compensate for that. So the amount of electrolytes that you'll need, specifically sodium or salt, is dependent on several things. One is your sweat rate, the intensity of your exercise. So if this is an all-out HIIT workout and you are like sweating, you're working so hard, that's going to be a little more intense. than maybe a slower kind of recovery ride. Or if you're outside for many hours and it's a very long ride, that can be equally as intense and you would need to replenish. Outside temperature plays a big role in how many the electrolytes and sodium content that you would need. So if it's really warm outside, I mean, it's very different training in like Hawaii than in Seattle, but we do have warm days. So some of those extra hot days, you would want more electrolytes or more sodium. Clothing plays a big part. So if you're wearing things that are breathable, as opposed to something that is like trapping in the heat and you're going to end up sweating a lot more. Heat and training adaptations. So over time with training, your body adapts. And you may try to keep you cooler, you may end up sweating more. So if you get to the point where you're like, I sweat so much now, more than I ever did, that is a training adaptation. And then genetics, that just plays a huge role in how many electrolytes and sodium you would need. So sodium is a really important part. Nerve impulses, it's how muscles contract and relax. If you notice muscle spasms, if you notice cramping, that all can be due to an imbalance in the electrolytes, including and especially sodium. Sodium is going to help with how your body holds on to hydration. So you probably have experienced if you ate a very, very salty meal and you feel like you're holding all this kind of extra fluid like water retention. That actually can be a really helpful thing for long rides. The more hydrated your body is, the more supported you're going to be in that long ride. So salt is a really important piece of that in being able to absorb and keep that in your body and bloodstream. More effective to add a little bit of salt and the electrolytes than if you were to just drink water by itself, which would then dilute what your body already has for electrolytes and salt. Just as a general recommendation, sodium intake for an adult is about 2,300 milligrams per day. That's about 1 teaspoon of salt. Endurance athletes or athletes in general going out are going to lose actually 500 to around 1,300 milligrams of sodium per pound of sweat loss. That's a lot. So this is where, as long as you don't suffer from high blood pressure, hypertension, you're probably going to need to supplement a little bit with salt in your water. And that can be found in the electrolytes, but sometimes that's not quite enough. So replenishing with about 500 to 700 milligrams of sodium per hour of exercise, that's about what the body can process per hour of exercise. In general, a packet of electrolytes, let's say a noon tablet, is probably somewhere like 300 milligrams of sodium. So you might just add a little pinch of sea salt into your water bottle in addition to the electrolytes. Couple things, like if you're very curious about what your actual sweat rate is and how much actual sodium you are losing in your sweat, there are a couple different things you can do. One is Levelin has a sweat rate sodium loss test kit that you do at home. You just put a couple patches or patch on, collect, or during a workout, collects the sweat, and then you send it in and they analyze it and they will tell you exactly what your sweat rate is and how much sodium you're losing. So you can super dial that in. And then there's a sweat test that you can just do at home, where you weigh yourself before and after a workout. There are some specific steps to that, and they're all, I've given you the website so that you can check that out if that's something that you're interested in. All right. Questions about this? I'm going to get much more specific about nutrition and hydration for the long ride in a little bit. Good. All right. Moving on to exercise. So cardiovascular exercise, we know the benefits. And in general, looking at cardio, looking at ways to incorporate high intensity interval training, pushing your anaerobic zone. So heart rate, 85 to 92% of your max. Tempo rides, also important, where you're really pushing, you're going at a pace that is very challenging, 75 to 85% of your max heart rate. Your longer endurance ride, you're probably somewhere around 60 to 75% of your max, something that you could kind of go all day. And then recovery rides, also important, 50 to 65% of your max heart rate. Strength training, so increasing muscle mass, really important to increase your watt or your power output on the bike, so as measured by watts. If that's something that can be done with dumbbells, barbells, bands, body weight, something that is putting stress on your structure, muscles and bones, so time under tension. And then flexibility and mobility training. So that's how you reduce the risk of pain and injury. It's how you increase flexibility and mobility. Range of motion is a really important piece, and it just overall improves the quality of your life. So things like yoga, Pilates, stretching at home, foam rolling at home, massage, trying to incorporate that into your weekly routine, into your daily routine, can be very beneficial. One quick note about the recovery ride. So a very simple, easy ride, but very supportive in terms of recovery. It just gets the oxygen circulating through the body, helps flush out the legs. It can be a really powerful tool just to help your body recover and prepare for a more intense ride. All right, moving on to sleep and recovery. So as I said, during sleep, that's when the body recovers. So the recommendation is 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep, sound sleep. There are some things that you can do to support that if sleep is an issue. So I have a lot of athletes who they just have a really hard time sleeping, tossing and turning. And without that sound sleep, you're not getting the recovery that you need. So one of the recommendations that I have found across the board works is a product called Natural Vitality Calm. It is magnesium, which is going to support muscle recovery. It also just calms the body and the mind, and it makes it so easy just to kind of fall asleep and stay asleep. L-glutamine, a really important piece for muscle recovery, very helpful to take at night and to help support the body in recovery. L-theanine, same, very supportive with helping with sleep and the body to recover. Pharma-GABA, also another supplement that can be very supportive. Melatonin can be something that can be very helpful. I like to recommend that you start with a very small dose and then slowly increase until you find the perfect amount that allows you to sleep soundly and wake up feeling like ready to go in the morning rather than groggy. So if you're waking up groggy, it can mean that maybe you're taking a little too much. But I suggest experimenting with any and all of these to see if you can improve the quality of your sleep, because you will notice a change in your productivity level, in your athletic performance, and just in general, your lifestyle. It makes such a difference when you get a great night of sleep. Other things that you can do to help support sound sleep: stop eating about 2 to 3 hours before bed. You should notice an improvement in your sleep if you aren't actively digesting food while you're trying to sleep. Avoid excess caffeine during the day. So even if you stop drinking caffeine in the early afternoon, if you spend your entire morning up to the afternoon drinking tons and tons of caffeine, that will catch up with you in the middle of the night. If you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, wait, but I fell asleep, why am I awake now? It could be too much caffeine earlier on in the day. And then also stopping the caffeine by the mid-afternoon can help support sound sleep. Other products, there's a product called Sleepy Time Tea, which is very helpful. Anything lavender is very soothing and calming. sound wave machine, reading a book, sleep meditation app. Those will all help you to fall asleep and stay asleep. A really important piece, avoiding any kind of screen time 30 to 60 minutes before bed, because that blue light can act as a stimulant and it can also suppress the natural melatonin production in your body. So all things here that you could try to help support and improve the quality of your sleep, which has a direct impact on your athletic performance. All right, so one more, self-care. So stress is a huge piece that is in our lives, and we don't always realize the impact that it has on our body. It affects your resting heart rate. It affects heart rate variability, which is a really important piece of recovery and athletic performance. It affects your overall recovery. So heart rate variability is something that can be measured. There are a couple different things. One is Whoop, which is a bracelet that you wear, or the Aura ring also measures heart rate variability. So basically, heart rate variability is the variability between the heartbeats, and it's based on your nervous system. So the two competing branches, when they are in balance, they are telling the nervous system, kind of, or the heart, what to do. And that's where you're going to get a lot of variability between heartbeats. When one is out of whack, so let's say you're stressed, you're in fight or flight mode, that takes over and it pretty much tanks your heart rate variability and your overall recovery. Your body just isn't primed and ready or recovered and ready to really be productive in a workout. So noticing that, measuring that, or at least being aware when you are under stress and your heart rate is up, trying to calm your breathing, trying to relax and get back into a more balanced nervous system will help support your overall recovery. So self-care, basically, it's anything that you do to be kind to yourself. Breathing is a huge piece of it. I try to suggest at least 15 to 30 minutes a day where you're taking care of yourself. You're doing something that is going to help your nervous system be in balance and your stress level come down. So it could be things like sauna, jacuzzi, maybe you like to write, or just sitting in the sun, or being outside, gardening, stretching, foam rolling, but definitely breathing and noticing when you're kind of in that like stressed out fight or flight mode, trying to bring yourself back to a calm place will help improve your recovery. So those are the lifestyle factors that need to be in balance to really optimize athletic performance.
Stacy,
Yep.
before we go on, can we do have a few questions about that
Perfect.
specific part of the presentation. There's a question about electrolytes. Why do some electrolytes have caffeine in them, especially if they can be a diuretic?
Yeah, so caffeine in a small amount, and usually when you see electrolytes that have caffeine, it's like 40 milligrams, maybe 70. So it's like less than a shot of espresso around. That's because there are benefits to a little bit of caffeine in improving athletic performance. So when I'm talking about, drinking several cups of coffee, that's going to act more as a diuretic, whereas just a little bit of caffeine is going to help support and improve athletic performance.
Another question on strength training. How do you recommend incorporating strength training during a bike training season?
So what I generally suggest is, if you're doing like a HIIT type ride, a tempo ride, and a long endurance ride, then in between that, if you can get 1 to 2 days of strength training in between, that's ideal. And then kind of flexibility, mobility training happening, if a little bit daily, or if you can catch a yoga class a couple times a week, that can also be very helpful.
Another question about sleep. How do you know if you're getting 50% REM or deep sleep. Are there
Yeah.
any indications that you're getting that in the nighttime?
Yeah, great question. So there are ways to measure that. And I talked a little bit about that with Whoop. I've got mine on. But that looks specifically at your sleep and breaks it down to let you know how much REM and deep you're getting. The Aura Ring also does that. A lot of Garmin's also provide that. So if you were, or the Apple Watch does it as well. So look at the sleep features. You have to wear your watch, obviously, while you're sleeping, but it will give you a breakdown so that you know how much sleep or REM and deep combined that you are getting. And it's very interesting because most people I work with think that their sleep is great until we actually look at the data. And then we realize, no, it's not. We work on experimenting with some different things to help support sleep. And it's like night and day. It just makes such a difference. You know what it feels like, right? When you have a great night of sleep and you wake up like ready to go. And then when you don't have a great night of sleep and you wake up and you want to hit your snooze 25 times because you're just like, oh, dragging. So what we want is that every day you wake up feeling ready and replenished and recovered and like ready for the day. And that is achievable by focusing on sleep.
One more sleep question. Are post-ride naps to be expected as a part of the recovery process?
100%. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you work really hard. And so sleep is when your body recovers, and you may find that you need, especially early on in your training and when you're really pushing out of your comfort zone, and taxing your body, a nap is probably something that you should just plan on.
One last question regarding heart rate. How do you determine your max heart rate?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I go by the highest number that you see. So what we know is everybody's heart rate, their max heart rate is totally based on like you and your body. So when you're training, when you push it to the max, you push it to that anaerobic, breathless, like right on the edge, ready to basically throw up, fall off the bike. And that's the highest heart rate that you see. That is about 92%, 90 to 92% of your max. From that, you can figure out what your 100% is. It's not 100% is not a number that you would see because generally the max that we're going to see is 92%. So figuring out your 100%, then you can figure out your calculations for what an endurance ride, what your target range is going to be, what a recovery ride would look like. So it's based on your specific highest heart rate that you see when you're at that point of like breathless and right on the edge in the moving to the anaerobic zone. I find that to be much more accurate than going by the 220 minus your age. If I did that, that would never. I have a much higher heart rate, and so I found that didn't work. And it's just easier with athletes to figure out what their specific high or what their specific max heart rate is. The sign of fitness is how quickly you're able to recover.
Stacy, just one more question and then we can go on.
Yep.
How big of a deal is the osmolality of the drink during the ride? Someone mentioned that they have been using Gatorade for years and now hear that the osmolality appears to be high by some standards.
That's a good question. I mean, Gatorade, I don't tend to recommend that. I don't think it's, I don't love the quality of Gatorade. So there are some products out there that I would choose over Gatorade, and we can talk about, I will talk about those specifically. I think they're going to be much better for getting the results that you need and getting the electrolytes on board, the salt on board, than something like Gatorade.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, great questions. Keep them coming. Okay, so let's talk about glycogen. So glycogen is basically a storage form of carbohydrates. And then during exercise, it's kind of your body's preferred energy source. So it's going to pull from your glycogen stores. So glycogen is stored in the liver and in muscles. And you want to make sure that you have the glycogen stores as full as you can on a long ride. They'll last about 60 to 90 minutes. And then you have to start supplementing with nutrition. And we'll talk more about that when we get to that point. So once the glycogen stores are depleted, your blood sugar starts to drop and you're going to lose your energy. And that's where that term I'm sure you have heard of bonking comes into play, where you just like have nothing more to give. You feel like you are completely empty. So unfortunately, once you're in that state, if you're not supporting your body through additional nutrition sources, there's a chance that you're going to start breaking down muscle mass, because the body will use protein as a fuel source in addition to fat. But we want to try to avoid any kind of breaking down of muscle tissue. So glycogen stores are extremely important. And that's where we talked about the percentages of carbohydrates, making sure that on long rides, you're pushing that in the days leading up to a long ride to 50 to 60% of your calorie intake to ensure that your glycogen stores are full. So let's see, glycogen. I don't know if I think this is interesting. So about 1 pound of lean muscle tissue can hold about 5 to 6 grams of glycogen. With every gram of glycogen, there are about 3 to 5 grams of water with that. So also another source for hydration, and another reason to work on building muscle mass, because the more muscle mass that you have, the more glycogen stores you would be able to have. But we're going to talk about how to top off those glycogen stores and to make sure that we don't end up in depletion. So how does that happen? What is depletion and how do we avoid it? So causes of glycogen depletion: overtraining, not allowing your body to recover. This is where sleep comes into play, right? So not getting the sleep that you need, your body isn't recovering, you're not supporting it with nutrition, hydration, and you're just always working from a depleted state. Low carbohydrate intake. So if you are not eating carbohydrates, or at least carbohydrates that are supportive of the body, you're not going to be able to fill the glycogen stores, and you're going to not be able to have the energy to pull from in that long ride. Lack of proper nutrition. This is where nutrition has such a huge piece. If you are not fueling your body like an athlete, you're not eating systematically throughout the day, you're not getting the protein, fat, and carbohydrates that you need, you risk not having your glycogen stores filled. And then strenuous exercise without replenishing. So you have to be really kind of thoughtful about your workout routine and making sure that you're not like back to back to back to back high intensity rides, but giving your body a chance to recover and supporting it, coming at it from a holistic perspective. So supporting your recovery and your workouts through lifestyle, those healthy habits, that's going to give you the best chance to recover quickly and prepare for the next ride. Signs of depletion, glycogen depletion. So you've probably felt this, where your legs just feel heavy, like they're maybe covered in cement, and you just can't even like get the pedal stroke going. Hard to focus. Your normal training session just seems like your perceived effort is like beyond what you're actually like noticing in your WOD output. Any kind of dizziness, sluggishness, nausea, general like fatigue, where you just feel like you can't go on. In fact, you might even stop your session because you're done. You're exhausted, irritable, you have nothing explosive in you. So if you wanted to pass another rider, like forget it. You're going to drop off the wheel and you've got nothing to give. You feel empty. Inability to recover quickly. You've got ongoing soreness, risk of injury at that point. You feel the decrease in your strength and power. And we talked about increased rate of perceived exertion. So you just feel like you're working so hard and you look down if you're measuring watts or maybe your heart rate and you're just you're struggling. There's a drop in blood sugar and definitely that lactic acid buildup in the muscles. So you feel that your legs are burning. So those are all signs of glycogen depletion and kind of what bonking feels like. So how do we prevent that? All right, so in general, healthy eating is going to be balanced. About 30% of your calories coming from protein, 30% from fat, 40% from carbohydrates. 1 to 3 days before a long ride, you want to make sure that your glycogen stores are full. So this is where you're going to back off the protein a little bit, back off the fat a little bit, and you're going to increase the carbohydrates. To keep in mind, about 3 to 5 grams of carbs per pound of body weight is what we're talking about for like a professional cyclist. That's a heck of a lot of carbohydrates. I would be so happy if you push it to 60% of your intake, like 50 to 60. So if you're eating, let's say 3,000 calories a day, times 60%, that's about divided by 4. So that's about 450 grams of carbohydrates. That's a lot. That's a lot of carbohydrates to get on board. And it takes thought and planning to make sure that you can get that you hit that. Okay, eating a full balanced meal about an hour and a half to 2 hours before your workout. That will give you enough time to digest, but you'll have that energy on board. Or a balanced snack 30 to 60 minutes before a workout. A little bit smaller because we don't ever want that heavy feeling on the gut during a workout. So timing is really important. What you eat will also determine how far in advance you need to eat. So for example, if I know that my workout is about an hour away and maybe I'll choose to have a really balanced smoothie that has protein, carbohydrates, and fat. That's easily digestible. I'm not going to feel it heavily on my stomach while I'm trying to work out. If I'm going to eat an actual meal, I'm probably going to need about 2 hours to digest that and to feel the benefits of that meal. Anything longer than that, now you risk getting into a fasted state. Working out in a fasted state has benefits, but increasing your athletic performance or maximizing your athletic performance is not one of the benefits of working out in a fasted state. And so I don't recommend that, especially for any kind of intense workouts or for a long ride. Okay, so timing is really important, and it's something that you're going to want to experiment with so that you know, generally, depending on what you're eating, how long it takes you to feel like, okay, I've digested this, I'm ready, I feel really good. And you're not in a state where you're like, gosh, but I'm already hungry again. I don't want you going into a workout feeling that I'm super hungry, because then now you don't have that immediate energy to pull from. Be very intentional about your nutrition on your ride based on the intensity and the duration. So this takes a lot of thought. And when we get into the long ride piece, and how often you need to be eating something and what you're eating, you have to think that through in advance, because you're going to be stuffing your jersey with all kinds of things. So definitely you want to think in advance how long the ride will be and plan for that so that you are prepared and you have everything with you. Don't be caught out on the road 3 hours into a ride with nothing to eat, that is where the bonking will happen. You're with full glycogen stores. So now it's like 3 days before the ride, the long ride, you've like really been intentional about increasing your carbohydrates and you feel ready to go. So that's going to give you about 60 to 90 minutes before those empty out, which means anything over a 60 to 90 minute workout, you're going to need to start incorporating nutrition into that ride. We're going to talk about the difference between fast acting and slow burning fuel and how to bring that on board about every 45 to 60 minutes, anything over 60 to 90 minutes of a workout. Your body can handle about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. That's about what your body can process. So you want to make sure you're in that range. And that's going to be around 120 to 240 calories, just to generally keep in mind. But you have to keep fueling about every 45 minutes or so. We will talk more specifically about that. Eating a balanced meal within 60 to 90 minutes after a workout will help to replenish the glycogen stores that you've just depleted. It will also support recovery. That balanced meal should include carbohydrates, protein, healthy fat. And then another thing you could consider is a recovery drink. So one that I like is the vegan Recoverite. I'll talk more about that as well in a little bit, but that has protein, carbohydrates, fat, electrolytes. So that can be something that if you get back from the long ride and you're like, I'm just not ready to eat yet, drink something like that, that when your muscles are primed for uptake, your body will utilize that immediately. Then that gives you a little time before you have to worry about the getting the meal on board. The Noon Recovery Podium Series is also a nice one to support recovery. All right, any questions about glycogen before we get into the next part, which is going to be fueling during the long ride?
There are a couple questions.
Okay.
Is there anything that a rider can do if they're cramping up while riding, other than upping their electrolyte intake on that ride?
Salt will help right away. So having like a salt tablet with you, or but generally, if we can support, when we talk about fueling or hydration on a long ride, I'll talk about before, during, and after. So if you approach the ride well hydrated and with electrolytes on board before, during, and after, that should help to reduce any cramping that happens, but salt is probably the best.
Great. And then there's a question, what is a healthy fat?
So healthy fat, different from like saturated fat that we would find from animal fat. So any of the plant-based sources, nuts, nut butter, seeds, seed butter, avocado, olive oil, avocado oil, MCT oil, coconut oil, those would be more of healthy fats.
And I actually have a question.
Mhm.
Can you explain how someone who is on a low carb diet, such as a keto diet, can prepare for long rides if they can't load up on carbs beforehand?
Yeah, so that's challenging. So the thing about keto is you have to be very consistent with training your body to use fat as the primary fuel source. And that takes time, and it can be a little painful to get there, and you'll feel very fatigued. But eventually, if you stick with it, your body will switch over and use fat as the fuel source, as the primary fuel source. The thing with keto, that if you then are like, okay, I've been doing it for 3 months and I'm going to go out and have a pizza, it throws your entire system off, and you almost kind of have to reset and restart and retrain the body, because the body's preferred source of fuel is a carbohydrate, is sugar. So I think my best advice on keto is commit and stick with it and keep the carbs way under 50 grams of carbs a day.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's all the questions right now.
Okay. All right. So moving on to fueling during a long ride. All right. So there are two types of energy sources. Fast acting, that is primarily glucose. It's already broken down. It's going to enter the bloodstream very quickly. It's going to give the body immediate energy. So then there's slow burning carbohydrates. Those include protein and or fat with the carbohydrate. That slows down the absorption process. So it's going to last a little bit longer. But there are, I think you need both. And I've found the best when you alternate between the two. So you go with a fast acting gel, and then you switch it to more of a slow burning. So about every 45 minutes, 45 to 60, and you just have to experiment with it. It also depends on the intensity of the ride, how often you're fueling. Start with a fast acting and then switch it to slow burning and just alternating between the two over the amount of time. That's where the planning comes into play. So talking about fast acting, I like Muir Energy as it's probably the cleanest gel that I've seen. They have both a fast acting as well as a slow burning option. And then your typical GU energy gel, it's about 21 grams of carbohydrates in the form of a very fast acting sugar. I like the Roctane energy gel that includes the carbohydrates. It has electrolytes, a little bit of caffeine, and we know that a little bit of caffeine can help improve athletic performance. It also includes amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks to cellular repair, muscle repair, and support for recovery. ProBar Chews, another one for a more like a healthy option. Chunks of sweet potatoes. So I'll just cook up like or roast a bunch of sweet potatoes and put them into bite-sized pieces in a bag and just throw that in the jersey. And then you just eat sweet potatoes. That's probably the cleanest, obviously, option. If you didn't want to go with one of the gels, Cliff Energy Block Chews, that's another one, all fast acting energy. So if you ever feel like you're bonking, sometimes that can be at the point of no return. But if that does happen, get one of these fast acting gels on board quickly. It will go, you'll immediately feel the energy boost within minutes. It can be a very supportive tool. So different from slow burning carbohydrates, things like, so the Muir Energy has a slow burning option. I like peanut butter and honey sandwiches cut into bite-sized pieces, thrown in my jersey. So really easy to just grab one. It has the carbohydrate, it has a healthy fat, a little bit of protein, and then the honey is that like fast acting carbohydrate. So that can be a really healthy option that can be very supportive on a long ride. An RX bar, Cliff bar, trail mix, just be careful with dried fruit. You don't want to eat too much of it. It can have cause a little bit of gut distress. So just be aware of not overdoing it with any kind of dried fruit, which you would find in an RX bar or in dried trail mix with dried fruit. So the big thing is anything over 60 to 90 minutes for a long ride. At about the 60-minute mark is when you're going to start your systematic addition of nutrition. Start with a fast acting option about every 45 minutes, switch it up between fast acting and slow burning throughout the entire ride. And that should keep you supported throughout the entire ride. So you will not lose your energy or your drive and you won't bonk on that ride. Questions about food or nutrition on a long ride?
Not any that haven't. Okay, here's one. How many calories? Um,
How many calories?
yeah, I'm not sure what the context is on that, but
So when we going back to glycogen depletion, we talked about your body can process about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So about 120 to 240 calories is what you're going to experiment with. So that's going to be about a gel for the most part, or, a small sandwich, probably, or half a sandwich. That's probably about what you could handle in that time. So you don't want to eat so much that it drags you down. You just want to keep just adding a little bit of kind of fuel to the tank systematically.
another question, how would you adjust for a multi-day long ride, days in a row?
So if you're doing like the Tour de France, where you have to be ready to ride every day for
Sure,
many hours
sure.
a day.
Or for folks that are doing like a 2-day STP.
Yeah. Okay. So again, eating, you're going to have to eat a lot. So being prepared with a really balanced meal leading up to it. So in the days leading up to it, you have to really top off the glycogen stores. A balanced breakfast before, and then you're going to need just a ton of fuel. Well, the nice thing about STP is they're going to have fuel stations. So just make sure you take advantage of those fuel stations. Again, like every 45 minutes or so, you're going to want to get some kind of fuel on board. And I wouldn't leave it. I don't like just gels all day long. I don't feel like I don't feel great. And so that's where I like the slow burning option. So you mix it up with some nuts and dried fruit, or a Cliff Bar, or peanut butter and honey sandwich. But kind of alternating between the two should give you enough. And then that night, really big meal, a lot of carbohydrates, with some protein and fat. Sleep, as all of those things we talked about. So getting the best sleep that you can get. We'll talk about hydration in a second. And then the next morning, a really balanced breakfast. Again, get ready for day 2.
One last question. Do you have any experience with, or can you recommend the app Eat My Ride? Are you
I
familiar
don't
with
know
that?
that one. I'll have to look into that.
Okay. And that's it for now.
Okay. I'm going to write that down. All right. Okay. All right. So I recommend and I'm assuming this is you're going out in a morning ride. So drinking about 24 ounces of water with electrolytes, with a pinch of sea salt in the water before you go out on that ride. So you're pre-hydrating. Then during the ride, 1 16 to 20 ounce water bottle, so your typical water bottle, per hour, and alternating between plain water and water that has added electrolytes, and probably the pinch of salt as well. It kind of depends on how much sodium is in the gels or the food that you are eating. So if there's not a lot, if you're choosing a electrolytes or a gel that doesn't have much in terms of sodium, that might be where you add a little extra pinch of salt. If you are look at the label. So if you are drinking electrolytes that have 500 milligrams of sodium, you're probably okay. But if it's something that's it's 100 or 200, then I would probably add that pinch of sea salt. Another addition, if you don't want to always drink electrolytes, you can get that naturally through coconut water, a little bit of cherry juice, And that will provide electrolytes and sugar and vitamins as an option to try something different if using like Noon tablets or some type of electrolyte source doesn't sound good. Roctane Energy drink is complete with fast burning carbohydrates. It has electrolytes, it has amino acids, a little bit of caffeine, and at about 250 calories, 60 grams of carbs, and 100, actually, I think it has a 300 milligrams of sodium. That's going to hold you for a good hour. That's going to be a good one. That's probably the most complete that I've seen that you could have in a water bottle. There's also Roctane gel that is similar, not quite as half the amount of carbs in the gel, but this could be something that you have in one of your water bottles. Could be a very supportive drink. The Noon Sport Hydration, they have a with caffeine or without caffeine option. Again, it's not a lot. It's just a little bit to help support athletic performance. So it's got electrolytes and about 300 milligrams of sodium. And then the Noon Endurance Hydration, that's part of their Podium series, is electrolytes with about 380 milligrams of sodium. So remembering back, we were talking about sodium, that depending on your level of sodium loss, so noticing if you are always have a lot of white crystals all over you, you're probably losing a lot. You probably want to supplement on the high end of sodium. If you're not a huge sweater, then maybe that's enough for you and you can kind of be on the lower range. But just being really mindful about that and playing with adding a little bit of salt, sea salt to your water bottle can make all the difference. After the ride, you're going to want to hydrate with water and more electrolytes and a little more sodium after to help replenish everything. The Noon Recovery is a nice one. It has electrolytes. It has about 250 milligrams of sodium. It has the branch chain amino acids as well as L-glutamine. So we already talked about L-glutamine being very supportive in helping the body to recover. The branch chain amino acids will also help with recovery. Amino acids are basically the building blocks of protein, and it just helps to replenish the muscles and support the recovery. Hammer Nutrition, I like the vegan Recoverite. I'm not a huge fan of whey protein just because I find that people are affected by dairy, and I think it's important to experiment with cutting it out to see if you notice a difference, especially in how you're able to breathe. Again, dairy can have side effects of like a really runny nose, and that can be super irritating on a bike. So something to play with. I just recommend the vegan option, but there is also a whey protein option. It includes electrolytes, it includes sodium, protein, L-glutamine, and this would be a really good option for immediately after a ride to help start the recovery process. As soon as you're done exercising, your muscles are primed for uptake. They are ready. They want to start replenishing. So getting some type of recovery, a smoothie on board or a shake like this on board can be really helpful. And then make sure that you follow that up with a full meal within about 90 minutes, 2 hours max, but I'd say 60 to 90 minutes would be ideal. Okay, so that is kind of what I suggest for hydration. Any questions about that?
There was a question about protein shakes after a ride. Is that something that you would recommend in addition to loading up on electrolytes and sodium?
Yep. So that that Hammer Nutrition vegan Recoverite, that's a protein shake basically. But it also has carbohydrates, and then it has a little bit of sodium, a little bit of electrolyte. So it kind of has everything that you would need. You could definitely do some type of protein shake. Just make sure it's balanced. So again, like you've depleted everything. So you want to make sure that you are recovering with carbohydrates for sure. Protein is going to support your recovery. Healthy fat is just going to help to keep you satiated. And then anything else that you can add, well, definitely the electrolytes we know are a huge piece. Just like with nutrition, after the fact, you're going to need to replenish your electrolytes. So you probably use them all. It's probably like through your sweat, gone. So after the ride, really important to replenish the electrolytes and the sodium.
A few more questions. What are your thoughts on chocolate milk post ride? And also, there's a question about liquid IV and whether or not that's helpful.
Okay. So chocolate milk, sure. I typically recommend, if you've already experimented with cutting dairy out and you find that you notice no difference, great. That can be a great post ride option. If you have not experimented with cutting out dairy, I highly recommend it. Try it for a week or two and see if you notice any difference. If you don't, then add it back in. If you do, then you'll thank me later. But so just remember that you need protein, you need carbohydrates, and you need healthy fat. That's how you're going to replenish after a ride. So whatever that looks like for you, certainly chocolate milk could be part of it. But remember, fueling like an athlete, making sure that you're getting single ingredient, really healthy sources to support your body is going to be probably the best way to go. And then the other question was about
liquid IVs.
Yeah, liquid IV. So liquid IV is interesting because it has about 500 milligrams of sodium, one of the higher electrolyte sodium combos. So that could also be a good option for if you know that you definitely suffer from sweating out a lot of salt. The 500 milligram option could be a good one.
We have one more question that is about dieting and specifically dieting between rides to help, for folks that are looking to lose fat or body mass. How can you incorporate that into a training schedule that, with these nutritional points?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So looking at ways to lean out while in a training cycle is challenging, but it is very doable. So one of the things that I think is really important is to figure out what your body needs in terms of the caloric intake to support your workouts. So once you know what that is, so let's say it's 1,500 calories a day, you just create a slight deficit. So by dropping that to 1,300 calories, you probably won't feel it as much. It shouldn't affect your athletic performance, but it creates enough of a deficit that you're able to start digging into fat stores. It's a very fine line because you don't want to diet in a way that is going to leave you feeling starving and that will affect your training. And it can be done. It has to be very precise. And there are other strategies. So like carb cycling is a big one. Calorie cycling can be a supportive way to make sure you're getting enough in like harder rides, but then backing off on calories and or carbs different days. So there are strategies. I would just say, make sure that you are getting enough to support your training and that you're not feeling starving, but that you're pulling back just enough to create that deficit.
Great, thank you. And also just want to do a quick time check. We're about 20 minutes till 8 o'clock, so we can hold questions till the end of the presentation if you'd like to make sure that we get through the material.
Yeah, so I just have a little bit left. We're going to talk about electrolytes and just a little bit more about cramping. And then I'm happy to take questions for the rest of the time. So talking about electrolytes and what they do for the body. So the electrolytes are magnesium, potassium, sodium, chloride, phosphate, and calcium. And we know, and you've probably heard, like magnesium and potassium and sodium actually are like really like if you're in any kind of an imbalance, you will experience cramping majorly. So making sure that you avoid any kind of imbalance will help support the cramping issue. So electrolytes are responsible for muscle contractions. They're sending nerve signals throughout the body, a really, really important part of the body. And it's important to keep them balanced and recognize that you are losing your electrolytes through sweat, and to make sure that you replenish. You'll know that you're experiencing an imbalance in electrolytes if so dehydration basically is a huge piece. Typically diarrhea is a big one, that you'll know that you're dehydrated or that you are experiencing an imbalance in your electrolytes. Fatigue for sure. Headaches, definitely. Your heart rate, heartbeat can be irregular, but the muscle cramping, muscle spasms, and weakness are a huge sign, and we want to avoid that at all costs. If it gets really bad, you can experience nausea and vomiting, tingling, numbness. Those are things that aren't great when you're on a ride. So recognizing this is not something that is just for training, but this is something that you're going to be working on like all day, every day. So making sure that you stay hydrated, making sure that you are aware of how much you're sweating and that you're replenishing with electrolytes so that you don't get to a point where there's an imbalance. We can prevent that through nutrition. So making sure that you're eating whole foods, nutrient-rich foods. Remember that vegetables are the powerhouse, nutrient-dense powerhouses. They're filled with minerals and vitamins. So supporting your body with like really whole foods will help provide balance, but then making sure that you hydrate. So getting in, we talked about at least half your body weight in ounces of water per day, and then adding electrolytes to that and a pinch of sea salt to that. Anytime there's training involved and sweat involved, you can support electrolytes and keeping that balance through supplements. So I suggested taking magnesium before bed can be very helpful. Eating foods rich in magnesium or potassium, coconut water, bananas, plant foods are typically pretty high in potassium and magnesium. Making sure that you are getting salt in your diet. I know like we went through a phase where salt was bad and we cut it out of everything. And honestly, salt plays a really huge role in our body and in the chemical things that are happening. So making sure that you're not, over salting and paying attention to hypertension and blood pressure, but in any kind of a training situation, long rides, like a little bit of salt is going to be important. I'm recently working with, I'm working with a cyclist, and he had this ongoing spasm in his leg. And maybe some of you have experienced this, where it's just this constant twitching, in any part in your body. It could be your eye, it could be your leg, it could be your arm. Like I've had that in my bicep where it's like talking to me. So we started adding salt. He literally just put salt into all day, just any water he was drinking, added a pinch of sea salt, gone. All the spasms are gone, cramping no longer an issue. So I'm pretty sure that salt is like a huge thing that will help prevent any kind of cramping or muscle spasms for you, as long as you keep it on board. And then supporting recovery. So really important that you get the sleep that you need, high quality sleep, and that you are fueling and hydrating before, during, and after the workout. That will help to support not only your glycogen stores and keeping them full, but also making sure that your electrolytes are balanced. All right, that's a lot. Any questions?
Not at this time.
Oh, okay. Well, I left my email address, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you have think you would benefit from more specific training, I'm very open and happy to help. And I wish you all the best on your training cycle and gearing up for this big ride. It's very exciting.
Hey, Stacy, there are some questions coming in.
Okay, good.
So, are there any supplements that you would recommend incorporating into this nutritional regimen?
Yeah. So I would say the supplements the supplements I recommend, I put in the sleep, on the sleep slide. Those are all things that will help support recovery as well as sound sleep. So take a look at those, and read the labels and see what they say and see if that's something that you'd be willing to experiment with. I like to add, just try something and see how you feel. And then if that feels good, maybe add something else and see how you feel. It's all about experimenting and figuring out what works best for your body. In general, D3K2 is one, especially in Seattle when there is no sun, that you should be taking every day. About 5,000 units, probably 5 to 10,000. That would be one I recommend. And then any kind of fish oil is really important for circulation, heart health, brain health. Those are kind of the big ones. And then definitely the ones that I recommended in the sleep section. Magnesium, huge. That's a huge one that I tell all my clients to take. I take it every single night. And I think it helps so much with muscle recovery, and it helps to improve the quality of sleep.
Great, thank you. And can you recommend any ways to deal with lactic acid buildup and ways to recover from that post-ride?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I sure can. So, Epsom salt bath is a great one. Adding whatever it's recommended on the package. I want to say 2 cups into a bathtub and just sit and soak. That will help. Foam rolling will help. Getting on not right after, but maybe the next day, getting on a bike and just doing a very light recovery ride will help to flush out your legs, and it will help to just get the oxygen circulating through your body and get everything moving. It makes a huge difference. And then fueling and rehydrating are the big ones. And getting enough sleep, supporting your sleep, and any of the sleep supplements that I suggested. L-glutamine is a really important one. So anything in that list will help support muscle recovery.
Great, thank you. And there was a question at the beginning of this meeting, or not really a question, but someone was hoping to walk away with good vegan or vegetarian options to fuel up for rides. Do you have any recommendations for folks that eat plant-based proteins?
For during the ride or for before the ride?
How about both?
Yeah, so plant-based eating, like the shakes that I'm suggesting are plant-based. So I love pea protein. I love Sprout Living products. I would say if you're making a smoothie, it's one of my favorites. I add Sprout Living pea protein. I add Naked PB or PB Fit, which is basically peanut protein powder. So it's just adding more protein to that. I use essential amino acids into the mix so that I'm making sure I'm getting enough of the amino acids that your body doesn't actually make. They're the ones that come from food. I like the essential amino acids because they are more inclusive and not just the branch chain amino acids. Then I'll add a little bit of fruit. So like, I like acai packs, the sugar-free or the no added sugar. I'll add banana, whatever kind of fruit that you like. I love Forager cashew unsweetened vanilla yogurt. So I add a little bit of that for some healthy fat in my shake. And then I'm always trying to get greens in whenever I can. So the base of my smoothie is the Suja Uber Greens, which is a very green drink. It's all vegetables. It doesn't really have any fruit in it. So that is the base of my smoothie. Plus I add athletic greens to that, which is just packed with minerals, vitamins, everything you could need. So that's a very balanced smoothie that can serve as a meal, and it's completely plant-based. And then during the ride, everything that I suggested, I don't think there's anything in there that has animal protein. So any of those suggestions would work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about, so we have a few specific questions. Is there an app that you would recommend that reminds you about hydration throughout the day?
Yeah, it's just a water reminder app. So if you go into the App Store and you type in water reminder, you have several options and I think they're free. Any of them will work. They're all great. And it basically just, it'll just remind you throughout the day and ping you to drink water. And then what I love about it is in that systematic training, eventually your body catches on. And then without even thinking, you're hitting all those water requirements throughout the day.
What are your thoughts on using a muscle massager in post-ride muscle recovery?
Love it. Yep, that's going to be the same idea as foam rolling, stretching, a Theragun, Hypervolt, all awesome options. And going back to the Epsom salt bath, Epsom salt is magnesium. So it's a way to get your body soaking in magnesium, which is very supportive of muscle recovery.
This one comes from me. I don't know why it tastes so good and why my body responds so well to it, but why do I crave pickle juice? And why are so many athletes craving pickle juice? I know it's a trend. I know that people are drinking a lot of pickle juice.
Yeah.
I did it before it was cool, and I'm just wondering why so many people are drinking pickle juice these days.
Salt. Yep, it's just salt. And it is so helpful. That's the only thing I mean, it tastes great. Like a pickle juice martini every once in a while is kind of fun. But in terms of like, it's basically just salt. It's adding salt. So that can be a very supportive way to get extra salt on board. And if your body's craving that, so think about cravings are like basically your body's way of getting you to get on board the things that it's missing, the imbalances. So if you love pickle juice and you think it tastes so good, it's probably because your body is craving and needing salt to take care of an imbalance. That's like when you're like really tired. Do you notice how you crave sweet things? Anything sugary, it just sounds so good. It's because it's your body's way of getting quick energy on board. Carbohydrates are your body's preferred energy source. Sugar, so carbohydrates break down to sugar. Sugar in the simplest form is going to go into the bloodstream very quickly. So that's where when you're like craving sugar, it's probably because you are lacking, you haven't been giving your body the things that it needs, and it's looking for quick energy.
Makes sense to me. Thanks.
Yeah.
We don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. I could talk about this stuff all day long. So If you're ever in Ballard, swing in, say hello.
Well, thank you very much, Stacy, for the presentation. And thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you learned something new. And we will see you all this weekend for ride number 3 of CTS.
Woo, good luck. Best of luck, everybody. Thank you.